The mining outpost on planet Targos 9 was not an exciting place. It was cold, dry, and always covered in red dust. People came here only to work. No one came for fun. The workers lived in metal shelters, worked long shifts, and counted days until they could leave. Darren was one of them. He was a quiet man in his late 20s. He worked as a maintenance technician. He fixed broken lights, faulty wires, and cooling fans. He did not talk much. Most people on the outpost did not even know his full name. He liked it that way. One morning, a supply ship landed on the far side of the base. Darren was sent to check the power cables in that area. As he walked across the platform, he saw a group of guards standing near a large crate. It was made of thick black metal and had blinking red lights on the sides. A warning was printed across the front in big, bold letters. Danger, live cargo. Curious, Darren slowed his steps. The crate made a loud thud sound from the inside. Something very heavy had hit the wall. The guards raised their rifles. One of them, a tall officer named Juno, gave orders to activate the containment field. With a hiss, the side of the crate slid open. Inside stood something none of them had ever seen. A 10-foot-tall alien woman stood there, her head nearly touching the top of the crate. Her entire body was covered in silver-blue fur. Her arms were long and strong, her legs thick like tree trunks. She had large hands, clawed feet, and glowing blue eyes that watched everyone carefully. She growled, low and deep. Everyone stepped back. Some shouted. A few pointed their weapons at her. The alien showed her teeth, sharp and wide, but she did not attack. She only growled again and paced like a wild animal in a small cage. The guards raised the containment field around her. Blue energy lines formed a square, keeping her inside. She did not test the field. She simply sat down in the middle, her glowing eyes still watching. "Where did this thing come from?" someone asked. "Classified," said Officer Juno. "She's going into holding. Science team will handle it." Darren stood still. Something in him felt strange. He looked at the alien and saw not a monster, but someone who looked lost. Later that day, a power alarm rang in Sector D. The energy system near the containment field was acting strange. Officer Juno called for a tech. Darren was the one who got the job. He walked slowly toward the holding area. The guards opened the door for him. Inside, the alien woman still sat in the middle of her energy cage. She did not move when Darren entered. But when he came closer to the wall panel, her head turned. Her glowing eyes met his. Darren froze. She stood up. Her full height was even more shocking up close. She took one step forward, stopping just before the energy field. She did not growl. She did not show her teeth. She just stared at him. Darren stared back. He could hear his heart beating fast. His hands shook slightly. But for some reason, he felt no fear. He could see something in her eyes. Not hate, not rage, but confusion, sadness. He spoke quietly. "I won't hurt you." The alien tilted her head. She blinked slowly. He moved to the wall panel and began fixing the power lines. As he worked, she stayed silent. Not a sound came from her, no growling, no sudden movement. After 20 minutes, Darren finished the repair. He turned around and looked at her one last time. She was still standing there, watching him. "Take care," he said. He walked out without looking back. That night, Darren had a strange dream. He stood in a forest filled with tall silver trees. The sky above was deep blue with 2 moons shining softly. A river flowed nearby. On the other side of the river, the alien woman stood. She was not in a cage. She looked calm. Her eyes were still glowing, but they were warm, not sharp. She raised her hand slowly. Darren raised his in return. Then, without words, he felt her speak. Not with sound, but with feelings. Pictures. emotions. He saw her running through the forest. He saw others like her, tall, strong, covered in fur. Then he saw fire, bright red flames burning the forest, screams, smoke, ships in the sky. She ran again, but this time alone. He felt her fear, her sorrow, her anger. She was not wild. She was not dangerous. She was hunted. Darren woke up sweating. He sat on the edge of his bed for a long time. He looked out the small window of his room. The mining outpost was still dark. Stars shone in the sky. Everything was quiet. But deep inside, something had changed. He remembered her eyes. She was not a monster. She was a prisoner. And for some reason she had chosen to show him the truth. Darren could not stop thinking about the dream. He had never felt anything like it before. It was not like a normal dream with strange pictures and no meaning. This one had feeling. It had clear images. It had her. The tall, furry alien woman had shown him her world. He had seen her people, her home, and the fire that had destroyed it. He had felt her sadness like it was his own. The next day, Darren went back to work like usual. But everything felt different. The machines, the walls, the people, none of it seemed important now. His thoughts kept going back to the alien in the cage, her eyes, her voice without sound, her story. He needed answers. Later in the afternoon, he got another repair task near the containment room. It was the same room where the alien woman was being held. Darren walked in with his toolbox. The guards let him through, not asking any questions. They had already seen how the alien stayed calm around him. Some even called him lucky. Others just stared. Inside the room, she was standing in the same spot, her head low, arms relaxed. She was not growling. As soon as Darren stepped in, her eyes opened. They were glowing softly, like before. He moved to the power panel again, pretending to check it. But his eyes stayed on her. "Can you understand me?" he asked in a quiet voice. She blinked once. "That dream," he said, "was that real?" She tilted her head, then placed her hand over her chest. Darren wasn't sure what that meant, but then he felt something, like a soft pressure inside his mind. It was not painful. It was gentle. His vision changed. The room faded. He was in a different place again. This time he saw a wide open valley filled with blue grass and golden trees. The wind was soft. He could hear deep humming sounds like songs. Her people were walking in peace. Children ran through the trees. They looked strong but kind. They built homes from stone and crystal. Their eyes all glowed the same way. Their fur shined under the sun. Then the sky turned black. A dark ship appeared above the valley. It was long and sharp, like a blade in the clouds. From it came machines, floating orbs that made a high-pitched whine. He saw fear in the eyes of her people. Some ran, some fought, but nothing worked. The orbs shot beams of light that froze people in place. Then another kind of creature stepped down from the ship. They were tall and thin, with long arms and pale skin. Their heads were smooth with no mouths. Their eyes were dark and empty. They were the Tharn. Darren saw them place a hand on the heads of her people. A strange light passed from their fingers. The furry aliens stopped moving. They stared forward like statues. The Tharn had taken their minds. Only a few escaped. The alien woman was one of them. She ran across the valley. She climbed cliffs. She hid in caves. She found an old ship and flew away from her planet. He saw her alone in space, floating, searching, hiding. Then he saw her being captured by humans, put in a cage, brought to Targos 9. The dream ended. Darren opened his eyes. He was still standing in the containment room. His legs felt weak. He sat on the floor, breathing slowly. The alien woman was still watching him. She had not moved. "You showed me everything," he whispered. She lowered her head gently. Darren now knew the truth. Her name, spoken through feeling, was Vela. He stood up and walked to the edge of the energy field. They were only 2 feet apart now. "My name is Darren," he said softly. Vela touched her chest again, then made a motion like she was drawing a circle in the air, her way of saying his name, perhaps. There was silence between them, but it was not empty. It was calm. That night, Darren had another dream. This time, he stood on a mountaintop with Vela. Stars filled the sky. She pointed toward a bright cluster of stars far away. He understood her meaning. She wanted to go there. A place called Ilara's Light, a holy place from her people's past. She believed something powerful was waiting there, something that could stop the Tharn, but she could not reach it alone. She needed help. She needed him. Darren woke up before sunrise. His hands were shaking, not from fear, but from purpose. For the first time in his life, he had something important to do. The next morning, Darren avoided the mess hall. He walked instead to the base library where the scientists stored reports and alien records. He searched the database for the word Tharn. Only a few files came up. All of them were warnings. Ships had vanished near Tharn-controlled space. Messages were lost. Crews reported hearing strange voices before disappearing. One report mentioned a survivor who claimed the Tharn could control minds. The warning was marked, "Extreme Threat." Avoid contact, Darren leaned back in his chair. Vela had not lied. Over the next few days, Darren visited her whenever he could. He brought food and tools just to get inside. Each time, they shared silence. Sometimes a feeling passed between them, sometimes an image, but each time the bond grew stronger. She did not growl anymore. When others came near, she still watched them with caution. But around Darren, she was calm. He had become her only connection to this world. But things were changing. Darren heard rumors that the scientists wanted to move Vela to a research lab on another station. They were preparing a stasis pod to freeze her during transport. If that happened, she would be locked away forever. He could not let that happen. He had to help her escape. He did not know how yet, but he would find a way. The wind outside the outpost grew stronger. Dust storms often came to Targos 9, but this one was heavier than normal. Red sand hit the windows. The sky looked orange and thick. Inside the base, everyone moved quickly. Systems were being checked. Doors were locked. Power lines were double-checked for damage. Darren stood near the backup power panel in Sector C. He watched the warning lights flash. The storm could knock out the energy grid at any moment. He knew that if the field holding Vela failed, there could be trouble. She would be blamed again. He grabbed his toolkit and ran. Inside the holding area, the hum of the containment field filled the air. Vela sat in her usual spot, calm and still. The guards outside the room stood with weapons ready, watching the power levels. Darren entered and went to the wall panel. He saw the red blinking lights. The storm was already draining power. The backup systems were old. If the storm lasted too long, the field could collapse. He looked at Vela. She looked back, not with fear, but with understanding. She already knew what was coming. Suddenly, the lights flickered. The ground shook. A loud snap sound echoed through the room. The energy field vanished. The guards outside shouted. "Containment failure!" Vela stood slowly. She did not roar. She did not run. She stayed where she was, eyes on Darren. Darren raised both hands. "Stay calm," he whispered. Vela looked at the door. She could have escaped. She could have crushed the walls or broken the floor. But she did not move. The door slammed open. 4 guards entered with rifles pointed. "Get down!" one shouted at Darren. "Wait!" Darren said. "She's not attacking!" The guards stepped closer. Their fingers touched the triggers. Vela looked at Darren. He stepped between her and the rifles. "No," he said. "You shoot, you go through me." The guards froze. The leader, Officer Juno, walked in behind them. "She's free." Juno said. "Step aside, Darren." "She's not the enemy," Darren said. "She's scared, not dangerous. She's not human," Juno replied. Darren looked at Vela. "She trusts me. Let me talk to her." Juno stared at him, then at Vela, who still had not moved. "2 minutes," he said. "Then we lock her down." The guards lowered their rifles a little. Darren turned to Vela. He spoke softly. "They're afraid. You have to show them you're not a threat." Vela looked down at him. Then she did something no one expected. She knelt. Her large form bent slowly, showing peace. Her arms rested by her side, her head lowered. The guards were silent. "She's submitting," one whispered. "She's not attacking." Juno said nothing. He turned and walked out. The others followed. Darren was left alone with her. Later that night, the power was fixed and the field was restored. But no, one felt the same. The story of what happened spread across the outpost. People began to whisper. The alien had escaped her cage but did not attack. She had listened to a human. She had trusted one man. Darren sat in his small room, thinking. The dream from last night was fresh in his mind. He had seen Vela's temple, again. The golden sky, the stone floor, the glowing circle in the center. It was not a weapon. It was a signal, a call for help. She had shown it to him for a reason. She believed he could help her get there, but he was just a worker, a man with a toolbox and a quiet voice. He had no ship, no weapons, no plan. He stood up and looked at the map on his wall. He traced the star systems with his finger. He stopped at a cluster far away. It matched the shape from the dream, he whispered to himself. Elara's light. Over the next few days, the base changed. Scientists came in from the central station. They wore white suits and carried scanners. They studied Vela from behind thick glass. Darren was no longer allowed in the room. They watched her movements, measured her strength, took readings of her brainwaves. One scientist said she was the most advanced creature they had ever seen. Another said she should be sent to Earth for full study. Darren watched from a distance. She was being treated like an object again, like she had no voice. At night, Darren dreamed again. This time, the dream was dark. He saw the Tharn. They moved like shadows. Their hands glowed with strange light. They reached toward stars and pulled ships from space. He saw Vela chained. He saw himself standing in fire. The dream ended with a sound, not a word, but a feeling. Darren woke up. He knew what he had to do. He had to help her escape. He had to get her off this base. The plan started small. He studied the guard shifts. He mapped the tunnels. He checked the old cargo routes. He knew how to cut power without raising alarms. He knew how to unlock gates with manual codes. But he would only have one chance. On the 7th night after the storm, Darren walked past the holding cell one last time. Vela stood behind the field, her eyes calm. He placed his hand on the glass. "I'm going to get you out," he whispered. She placed her hand on the same spot. No words passed between them. But the message was clear. They were no longer prisoner and worker. They were now a team, and the storm had only just begun. The sky over Targos 9 turned dark again. The winds were quiet, but something felt heavy in the air. Darren moved through the halls of the base with a careful look on his face. His plan was no longer just an idea. Now it had steps, risks, and a small chance of working. He had 7 days before the transport ship arrived. That ship would take Vela away. Once she was gone, he would never see her again. Darren worked silently. Each day, he repaired things that were not really broken. He checked the power systems near the loading bay. He made small changes in the gate controls. He added delays to the alarm lines. No one noticed. He was just a quiet worker with tools. Nobody watched him too closely, but he was watching everything. Vela stayed in her cage. Since the storm, she had not made a sound. Scientists came every day. They ran scans, flashed lights in her eyes, and wrote down strange numbers. She never looked at them. But every time Darren passed near the observation window, she turned her head. That small turn gave him hope. She still trusted him. One night, Darren entered the backup control room. It was empty. Most of the base was asleep. He opened the security panel with his ID. He typed in a code he had found from a broken console last week. The system unlocked. Darren opened the map of the base. He selected the holding cell, cargo gate 2, and shuttle hangar 3. He created a path. The system asked for confirmation. He saved it under a hidden name, Cleaning Route 7. Now the system believed that a cleaning machine would need to pass through those gates every day at the same time. Darren smiled. That would be their way out. The next step was power. The field around Vela could not be broken from inside, but Darren had learned where the power lines came from. There was a switch in a storage room 2 halls away. If that switch was shut down at the right moment, the field would drop for 10 seconds before backup kicked in. 10 seconds would be enough. Darren checked his notes. Time, route, power, shuttle. He only needed one more thing, a signal. That night, he sat in his room and held a small light in his hand. He had taken it from an old supply kit. It blinked with a soft red glow. Darren stared at it. Tomorrow, when the light blinked twice, it would be the sign. Vela would know. In the dream, Vela stood beside him in an empty starship. Her hand rested on the controls. The ship was old, but strong. Its engines were silent, waiting. She looked at him and pointed forward. The stars opened wide in front of them. The feeling came again, not fear, hope. The morning was quiet, too quiet. Darren walked to his workstation. He wore a tool belt and carried his toolbox. Nothing looked strange, but his heart beat faster. He passed by the holding cell. Vela stood, already watching him. He dropped the blinking light near the wall and walked away. It blinked twice. She saw. The plan had begun. At 1300 hours, the base entered its rest cycle. Lights dimmed. Systems ran on half power. Darren entered the storage room. He opened the switch panel. His fingers hovered over the controls. One breath. Then he pressed the shutdown button. The lights flickered. Alarms stayed silent. Darren ran. Inside the holding cell, the energy field vanished. Vela stood still. The scientists nearby shouted. One reached for the alarm. Vela moved. She crossed the room in 2 steps. Her large arm knocked the alarm box away. Another man tried to block her path. She pushed him gently to the side and kept going. The door opened. Darren was there. "Follow me," he said. They ran. The hallway was empty. Most people were not near this part of the base. Darren led Vela through the tunnels. The map in his mind was clear. He had walked these paths many times. At Gate 2, the system opened for Cleaning Route 7. They passed through. At the shuttle hangar, Darren used a stolen key card. The door unlocked. The small transport shuttle sat waiting, just as planned. Vela stepped inside. She had to bend low. Her shoulders brushed the walls, but she fit. Darren jumped into the pilot seat. He had learned basic shuttle controls from an old training manual, enough to lift off. "Enough to fly." He started the engine. The base lights turned red. They had been found. "Unknown shuttle activity detected," a voice said on the speaker. "Lock it down," another voice shouted. Darren lifted the shuttle. The hangar gate began to close. Vela reached out with both arms and pushed the steel doors. The metal bent. The gate stopped. The ship flew through the narrow gap and into the sky. Outside, the red dust clouds covered the land. Darren pushed the ship higher. A blast hit the back of the shuttle. A small guard drone had fired. Smoke rose from the engine. "Hold. Together," Darren said. Vela looked back. Her eyes glowed brighter. She placed her hand on the control screen. The screen lit up with strange symbols. The ship moved faster. The drone disappeared. Darren stared at her. "You did that?" Vela gave a soft nod. She had connected with the ship's systems. Darren checked the map. They were clear of the base. The stars opened in front of them. "Ilara's light," he said. Vela placed her hand on his. Together, they flew into space, free at last. The stars outside the ship were quiet and endless. Darren sat in the pilot seat, his hands tight on the controls. The shuttle moved slowly now. One of the engines had been damaged by the drone's blast during their escape from Targos 9. A red warning light blinked on the screen, but the ship was still flying. Vela sat behind him, her tall body taking up most of the space. She was silent, but calm. Her eyes watched the stars ahead. Her breathing was steady. They had escaped the base, but they were not safe yet. Darren looked at the navigation screen. A glowing line showed the path they were following. At the end of that line was Ilara's light. It was far, but not unreachable. If the ship held together, they would make it in 2 days. Suddenly, a soft alarm beeped. Darren checked the scanner. Something was following them. Vela stood up, her head brushing the ceiling. Her glowing blue eyes narrowed as she stared at the screen. A dark shape appeared behind their shuttle. It was long and thin, like a black needle in space. It moved without sound, without lights. Darren's heart sank. "It's a Tharn ship," he said. Vela did not speak, but Darren felt a wave of fear pass through his chest. Not from himself, but from her. It was small, hidden deep, but it was there. Even she feared them. The Tharn ship moved closer. Darren turned the shuttle left, then right. The engines groaned, but the shuttle responded. They tried to move through. An asteroid field nearby. Rocks spun around them like floating mountains. Darren guided the ship between them. One rock scraped the wing. Another passed just inches away. The Tharn ship followed with ease. It did not slow. It did not stop. Darren pressed the booster. The shuttle jumped forward, but the engine made a sharp grinding noise. The damaged part gave out. A small fire started, near the back. Vela turned and placed her hand on the engine wall. A soft light spread from her palm. The fire stopped. The warning light faded. Darren stared at her in shock. "You fixed it," he said. Vela nodded once. The Tharn ship was still. Chasing, then the voice came. It was not through speakers. It was inside Darren's mind. A cold, flat voice with no feeling. "Return the lost one. This is not your fight." Darren shook his head. He looked at Vela. She had her hands pressed against her head, her teeth clenched. She was in pain. The voice came again. "Surrender. Her mind belongs to us." Darren grabbed the manual radio and shouted, "Leave us alone. She is free." No answer came through the radio, only silence. Then a bright light filled the shuttle. A beam from the Tharn ship had locked on. The shuttle shook. Vela moved forward and pressed her hand on the front control screen. Strange symbols flashed. The ship turned sharply. The beam missed. Darren took control again. He aimed for a small moon ahead. "If we can land and hide," he said, "maybe we can lose them." Vela looked at the moon and nodded. The shuttle flew low over the moon's rocky surface. Craters and sharp cliffs passed below. Darren saw a cave. Near the edge of a dark valley, he brought the ship down fast. The landing was rough. Dust flew everywhere. The ship skidded across the ground and stopped just before hitting a rock wall. They had landed, but the Tharn ship was still above. Darren opened the back hatch. Cold air rushed in. Vela stepped out first. Her large feet hit the ground with strength. She looked up at the sky. The black ship hovered in the clouds. Darren grabbed a small pack of supplies and followed her. They ran toward the cave. Inside the cave, the walls were tight and dark. They moved deep inside, hiding in the shadows. Darren sat against the wall, breathing hard. "We can't run forever," he said. Vela sat beside him. She closed her eyes. A soft light came from her chest. Darren felt a new image in his mind. He saw a tower of crystal. It stood alone in space. Around it were symbols he could not read, but they glowed with power. He saw her people standing strong. He saw a signal being sent out, reaching many worlds. The message was clear. They needed to get to Alara's light. That was the only way to stop the Tharn. Suddenly the cave shook. A round drone entered, floating above the ground. It was small, but fast. A red eye glowed at its center. It scanned the cave. Then it pointed at them and made a loud screeching noise. Darren jumped to his feet. He reached for a metal rod in his pack. Vela charged forward. She leapt into the air and grabbed the drone with both hands. She crushed it like paper. Sparks flew. The pieces fell to the ground, but the noise had already gone out. The Tharn knew where they were. "We have to go now," Darren said. Vela nodded. They ran back toward the ship. The shuttle was damaged, but still able to fly. As they reached it, the black ship above began to open. A small pod dropped from its belly. It landed with a soft thud near them. From the pod, a tall figure stepped out. Its skin was pale. Its eyes were black. Its fingers were long. It had no mouth. The Tharn had arrived. Vela stepped in front of Darren. The Tharn raised its hand. A soft light formed in the air. Darren felt his head go numb. His vision blurred. But he grabbed Vela's arm. "I'm not letting go," he whispered. Vela roared, not in anger, but in strength. She ran at the Tharn and struck it with her full weight. The creature flew back and hit the ground. The light faded. Darren blinked. He could still think. He was still free. The Tharn stood again. Slower now. Vela turned to Darren and pointed at the ship. "Go," she said in a deep, soft voice. He ran into the shuttle and started the engine. Vela jumped in right after him. The hatch closed. The shuttle rose fast. The Tharn ship tried to follow, but something was different. Vela touched the control screen again. The shuttle's body glowed with the same strange symbols. This time, they were faster. This time, they escaped. The stars opened again, and ahead, Alara's light was waiting. The shuttle flew through the silent dark of space. Darren's hands were steady on the controls. The engine hummed softly. Outside the window, stars stretched in every direction like tiny bright jewels. Vela sat beside him, her eyes fixed on the screen that showed their course. Ahead was a cluster of stars that glowed with a soft golden light. That was Alara's light, the ancient place her people had spoken about for centuries. Darren had learned from her dreams that this place was special. It held a power that could help fight the Tharn. It was not a weapon. It was a call for help, a signal meant to bring together those who still fought for freedom. As they neared the star cluster, the shuttle's controls began to respond to Vela's touch in a new way. Her hands glowed faintly as she pressed symbols on the control panel. The ship's body shimmered with energy. Darren watched in wonder. "Can you control the ship like this?" he asked. Vela nodded slowly. Her eyes shone with a quiet light. She looked different here, stronger, calm, like she had found a piece of herself again. The stars ahead grew brighter. They flew through a ring of small asteroids, their surfaces sparkling with crystals. The shuttle passed smoothly. Vela's connection to the ship seemed to guide them safely through. Suddenly, the ship slowed near a small planet. It was covered in silver forests and blue rivers. The air looked clear. This was the home of her ancestors, long abandoned but still alive with ancient energy. Darren looked at Vela. She smiled softly. It was the first time he had seen her smile. "This is my world," she said. They landed the shuttle near the edge of a clearing. The ground was soft and warm underfoot. Vela led Darren into the forest. The trees were tall and bright. They glowed softly in the dim light. Strange birds sang in the branches. As they walked, Vela told Darren more through images and feelings. Her people were called the Silverin. They were peaceful and strong. They used their connection to nature and energy to protect their homes. But the Tharn had come and destroyed everything. The Silverin fought bravely, but they were few. Many were captured. Many ran away. Vela was the last Silverin alive. After walking for some time, they reached a large stone building. It was covered with glowing symbols. The doors were heavy but open. Inside, the air was cool and still. In the center of the room stood a tall altar made of crystal. It pulsed with soft light. Vela walked forward and placed her hand on the altar. The light grew stronger. The symbols on the walls lit up. Darren watched as the altar sent out a beam of light into the sky. It was a signal, a call. Vela closed her eyes and whispered, "Come home." Darren felt a change in the air. It was like the whole planet was waking up. He asked, "What happens now?" Vela opened her eyes and looked at him. "This signal will reach others like me," she said, "others who hide and fight. It will bring them together." Darren smiled. "Like a call to arms?" Vela nodded. "But there is more," she said. "To complete the signal, a human must touch the second altar." She led Darren to a smaller room, beside the main hall. Inside was another crystal altar, shaped like a circle. "This altar connects your mind to the signal," she said. "It will help spread the call across the galaxy." Darren was nervous but ready. He stepped forward and placed his hand on the altar. A warmth spread through his body. Images and voices filled his mind. He saw many worlds, many people, many creatures fighting for freedom. He felt their hope and fear. The signal connected him to all of them. Vela placed her hand on his shoulder. "You are the spark," she said. "Together, we can light the darkness." As the light from the altars filled the room, the shuttle outside suddenly blinked on the control panel. Darren looked. Warning lights flashed. The Tharn had found them. Vela's face grew serious. "They will come," she said. "We must prepare." Darren felt ready. He had learned much from Vela. They were not alone. The fight was just beginning. Outside the temple, the skies darkened. Darren and Vela stood side by side. They looked at the stars, and they waited. The night sky was full of stars, but the air was heavy with tension. Darren and Vela stood together on the hill near the temple. Below them, the glowing altars sent pulses of light into space. The signal was strong now, spreading hope to distant worlds. Darren looked at Vela. She was tall and calm, her silver-blue fur shining softly in the light. Her eyes held a quiet strength he had never seen before. She was no longer just a prisoner or a frightened alien. She was a leader. Suddenly, the ground shook. In the distance, dark shapes appeared on the horizon. The Tharn were coming. Vela's eyes narrowed. "We must prepare," she said. "This is the final fight." Darren felt his heart race. He was scared, but he knew he could not run. Together, they went inside the temple. Inside the great hall, the walls shimmered with ancient power. The altars pulsed with light. Vela placed her hands on the crystal again. Darren joined her. The room filled with a warm glow. Vela spoke in her mind. Darren felt her words like a song. "The Silverin are not gone," she said. "They live in the light. They fight with us now." Darren saw images of tall warriors covered in silver fur, holding glowing weapons. They stood with him and Vela, ready to fight. The temple's energy grew. Outside, the Tharn army advanced. Their ships darkened the sky. They moved with silence and deadly precision. Their dark leader stood at the front, tall and cold. They had come to end the Silverin once and for all, but they did not expect what awaited them. Vela stepped outside, her eyes shining bright. She raised her arms. The ground trembled. From the forest, glowing Silverin warriors appeared. They moved like shadows, swift and strong. Their weapons hummed with power. They were ready to protect their home. Darren stood beside Vela, holding a small weapon given by the ancient temple. It glowed faintly in his hand. The battle began. The Tharn struck with sharp beams of light and waves of energy. The Silverin fought, back with strength and courage. Darren ran between the trees, dodging attacks, helping where he could. Vela moved like a force of nature. She knocked down enemies with powerful blows. Her growl was not one of anger, but of hope. The warriors fought fiercely. The temple's light gave them strength. In the middle of the fight, the dark leader of the Tharn appeared. He was faster and stronger than the others. He moved toward Vela with cold determination. Darren saw the danger. He ran to help. Together, Darren and Vela faced the leader. Vela used her power to block his attacks. Darren fired his weapon carefully, aiming at the weak points in the dark armor. The leader snarled and struck back with deadly force. The fight was hard, but Vela's strength and Darren's courage made a difference. The leader stumbled. Vela roared and struck him down. The Tharn army faltered. Their ships began to retreat. The light from the temple grew stronger. When the battle ended, silence returned. The Silverin warriors looked around. Their home was safe. Vela turned to Darren. "We are free," she said. Darren smiled. Together, they had won. Days later, new ships arrived. They were friends, fighters from distant worlds who had heard the signal. They came to help rebuild the Silverins. Story spread across the stars. It became a symbol of hope and courage. Darren and Vela stood side by side, ready for the future. They knew the fight was not over, but they had the light, and the light would guide them.